Chapter 1 Helvisti. Nora took in a deep breath as the ship sailed out of the harbor and tugged at her long fur overcoat that blocked the cold wind as she turned for one last look back at the city. She would miss Takroon and its cozy, bone-white wattle and daub buildings with their shaggy thatch roofs. She watched them fade away until all that could be seen was lush green hills dotted with flocks of sheep and smiling shepherds that waved at the ship as it sailed on by. Both sheep and shepherds seemed to be so happy. Those lovely green whirling hills seemed so quiet and peaceful. Day by day she watched the landscape change, from pleasant, lush green hills to dark, gloomy, and jagged granite. These mountains were not green at all. Any speck of color was the beginning of a pale blue glacier peeking over the jagged ridges. Nora grimaced. Even the pine trees near the shoreline seemed more black than green. The crew trimmed their sails as the ship slipped into the busy sea lane that led to their final destination. Her determined sky-blue eyes gazed up at the Helvisti lighthouse on the snow-capped mountain that overlooked the city and large port below. The city stood out like a gem wedged between two seams of granite stone. Nora suspected the brightly colored buildings of randomly assorted, vibrant purples, blues, and bright greens were to make up for the perpetually oppressive, gloomy gray clouds and harsh, jagged, snow-capped mountains that sheltered the city from the Baru waste beyond. Nora dipped her chilled nose beneath her red scarf. She was glad Vila had gotten it for her. She had initially refused it, but during their brief stop in Takroon, he had bought it anyway, and halfway to Helvisti, he had regifted it to her, which she begrudgingly accepted. It wasn't purely out of pride. Naturally, while in her military uniform, she was expected to follow strict regulations. A bright red scarf, no matter if it was the finest, warmest, and softest Takroon wool in all of man, it did not match her green military dress uniform, and although she was breaking regulations, she was now too cold to care. After all, with rank came privileges. She was no longer a starry-eyed, fresh-faced field mage. She was a war mage, and as a war mage, she was soon to take charge of her own regiment of 2,000 soldiers, which left her only 10 other peers who could openly disapprove of her shortcomings to her face without being in danger of demotion, and merely 2 others in the whole province that had the authority to issue any binding commands. Not that they could or would. For example, Governor von Claris was an elected civilian leader and had no idea what the exhaustive dress regulations were to begin with. And General Samuth Gordon, well, he would have to talk to her dragon. Right then, a hollow knot formed inside her stomach. As she remembered the dragon's final moments, as she stared helplessly down at Goldeneye's broken body, and remembered all the promises she gave him. Promises that if he just stayed alive, she would make everything better. She had tried so hard to save him, only to be told she would have to put him down. Even now, her vocal cords were painfully raw and hoarse from the gut-wrenching scream of denial. But no matter how much she wanted to save him, no healer could mend him. The one who had tried had lost her life in the attempt. If Nora had the gift of healing, she would have died as well, even given up her own life if she thought it would save him. Some might have pitied Nora for losing her dragon, but no one would ever forgive her for killing Maya, not even herself. The gift of healing was rare, and healers had their own hierarchy and answered to their own exclusive rank structure. A healer could just about snub their nose to any mage or dragon rider, so long as they were in good standing with their own. While the position of a field healer would be hard to fill, there was only one Maya, and she would never be replaced. Punishment was deserved, and restitution impossible to pay. Truthfully, she wished she had been flogged for the incident, but instead of being forced to pay restitution and dragged through the street, she was promoted. Sort of. Nora had been sent to Helveste, the northernmost province in all of Marin, and tasked with the responsibility to take charge of the Dragon Wing and assist what was affectionately called the Lonely Division, or the Frozen Chosen. Of all the provinces, it was the largest, with the second fewest soldiers, second only to Barlington, which was the innermost province, protected on all sides, and was primarily comprised of farmland as far as the eye could see. Nothing bad ever happened in Barlington. For that matter, nothing happened in Barlington, and she missed that. If she had her way, she would have taken her lashings, shaven her head, and retired into obscurity, and found a mud hut to live in. That was not to be. Instead, she was sentenced to roam the frozen Baru Desert for the next 6 years. Nora wanted to curl up in a ball, but she couldn't. She couldn't and wouldn't because her sword companion stood beside her like a big, dark, warm, powerful furnace that radiated with excitement. She could sense the big man's presence. He was close to her, so close she could touch him. She turned, and her eyes went wide at the sight of dark, bare skin. Her gaze followed the black tribal tattoos that wound their way up his massive arms and chest. He had a radiant grin on his tattooed face as he took in the fresh air. "It's snowing!" Nora exclaimed. A deep hum resonated within his chest as he savored the brisk, cool air. Vila agreed. Nora couldn't help but be flustered. The rich, vibrant timbre that resonated from Vila made her feel warm all over. This ruined all of her pre-made plans to be absolutely miserable. Well, It wasn't so much that she wanted to be unhappy. She just didn't feel it was right. Being happy, after all the suffering she had caused, did not bring her any closer to restitution. She did not expect any of the mages in the Mender's Hall to ever forgive her, but she hoped somehow she could do something that would at least allow her to look in the mirror again and not feel absolutely wretched for having the audacity to smile back. Meanwhile, Vila was strutting around, having the time of his life. He was expecting a hero's welcome when he got home. Tragically, his parade was casting sunlight and chirping songbirds onto her funeral, and she hated him for it. "Where's your shirt? You're out of uniform," she demanded, with as much self-righteous indignation as she could muster. But she was not ready to hear his response. "In my pack. It is too hot for it, and the sun. I must enjoy it while summer lasts," he insisted. "Summer!" she spluttered. "Yes, in Helveste, there are only 2 seasons, summer and winter," he explained. "It's cloudy and snowing." "Thank Helveste, we have no mosquitoes," Vila agreed. However, he was not looking toward the city. Instead, his dark gaze was north, toward the great snow-capped volcano that could be seen even from the province south of Helvesti on a clear day. "There, do you see Helvesti? Have you seen anything so beautiful?" he marveled out loud. Nora shrugged. "The lighthouse is impressive," she admitted glumly. "It wasn't anything like Founder's Keep or the Dragon's Hall's watchtower in Glendon." "No, that is Helvesti," Vila insisted. Nora blinked and turned. "Oh, I thought you were talking about the city," she remarked in surprise. "No, that is not Helvesti. That is Helvesti. Everything is named after her," Vila explained. Nora let out another vexed, withering sigh. Everything was named Helvesti. There was Helvesti, the province, Helvesti, the capital, the Helvesti Strait, the Helvesti Inn, the Helvesti Port, the Helvesti Clothing Shop, and yes, of course, it was named after the goddess Helvesti. Helvesti was a local god, not officially recognized in the pantheon. There were many locally observed gods and spirits in every province and town. The pantheon was a shrine or temple that held images that represented gods within it, or at least the top universally recognized gods in all of Marn. "Oh yes, blessed be her name," Nora murmured. Well, Nora wasn't exactly a devout follower of Helvesti. She gave her respects. It was the proper thing to do. The last thing she wanted was to cause a ruckus or disturb a local god. While Nora was a devout believer and burned incense regularly to the pantheon, she got a little annoyed at the thought of some overly zealous believers in the business of deifying every local spirit, hill, den, shrub, doorstop, and trickle of water. If people made a mountain of a god, the next proclaimed oracle could just as easily build a shrine for every damned grassy knoll or ant mound. Well, Nora firmly believed one shouldn't blatantly disrespect the local spirits. If she had favor with Sprigga, the goddess of the earth and new beginnings, the local spirits connected to the earth wouldn't harm her. That is, if Maltine, the god of trial, testing, and all-around misfortune, had anything to do with it. Maltine was a controversial god. No one would dare remove him from the pantheon for fear of the perceived retribution to follow. Devout Maltine worshippers went about playing pranks on their fellows to keep Maltine entertained and distracted, so that he did not get up to any real mischief. Hence the saying, if anyone was acting a fool, or when things were unforeseeably out of place and going horribly wrong, you should always shout, "Side of Maltine!" Because if Maltine was not credited, he would be insulted and feel obligated to do something far worse. The crackling sound of parcel paper being torn open brought Nora back, and then she glanced over toward Vila and frowned when she caught the sweet smell of tiny yet expensive bundle of beeswax candles. "What are you doing?" she demanded. Vila merely smirked as he pulled out a fine paper hoop. He didn't need to, and wasn't going to explain himself. She already knew what he was doing. But it wasn't so much as to what he was doing that bothered her, but the promise that he had broken. Nora's face darkened, angrier now that Vila didn't so much as recognize what he was doing or bother apologizing. As much as it hurt, she wasn't going to let it go. "You swore," Nora insisted. "Yes, I promised I would not buy any more this month. But I did not say I would stop lighting them," he agreed. Nora's fiery blue eyes shot down toward the large burlap sack at his feet, and turned toward the smiling cleric, who had a faraway look as he gazed wistfully out north toward the great mountain Helveste. As he smiled and patted the heavy money pouch full of silver beneath his robes. "Son of Maltine, how much did you spend on candles and rice paper?" Nora demanded. But her anger and scathing words of disapproval were like water to a duck. "I swore an oath. If Helvesti spared your life, I would give thanks and offerings every day," Vila insisted stoically, and smiled as he lit the candle and watched the sweet-smelling lantern be carried off into the cloudy gray sky. "It's a bloody fire hazard," Nora growled irritably. Not so. The wind is going north, and the ship is sailing northwest," he announced confidently. Nora responded with a pointed sarcasm. "Well, it's a good thing the wind never changes direction." Vila's smile faded, then let out a small grunt. That, of course, would be the closest thing she would ever get to him admitting that she was right. By Sprigga, Vila was a stubborn bull. Even if she used her abilities to shake him up and down in the air, he would never give in. She wouldn't ever do that, but she wanted to. "I give my word. I will not light any more until we are off the ship," Vila declared stoically. Right at that moment, the large three-masted cargo ship slowly turned into port. Nora shot him an angry glare. I should order you to stay on board and guard the ship, she threatened grouchily. You could, but I would not follow it, he shrugged. I swore an oath to follow and protect you, so therefore you cannot order me to stay behind, he insisted. I thought guardians also swore oaths to obey their magi, she teased. But Vila was not fazed. The spirit of the oath is greater than the words spoken. I swore first to protect, and then to serve. Therefore, technically, I don't have to obey anything you say. If I feel it puts you in danger, he shrugged. You should have been a lawyer, Nora sighed. As much as she wanted to be happy, she couldn't help but feel resentful. After all, her punishment was Vila's reward. She had lost her dragon and killed a renowned field healer, but Vila, her sword companion, had dragged her out of a lake, revived her, and carried her kicking and screaming for miles over mountain and valley back to Founder's Keep. Yes, Vila had saved her and was entitled to a handsome reward. Being from Helvisti was a win-win for everyone. Vila, the brave sword companion, would be rewarded, and Nora Frey, the loathsome, derelict Fink, would be sent away. Far, far, far away. Out of sight and out of mind. When the ship was secured, the cleric raised his voice, and all eyes turned toward the north. Blessed be Helvisti for granting us a safe voyage. Amen, blessed be your name, chorused the crew. Once the prayer was over, Vila glanced down, but his burlap sack that had been at his feet was gone. Vila turned. Nora smiled back at him as she hefted up the large bundle in her arms. Blessed be her name, she chimed right before she dropped the sack into the ocean. But the reaction she had hoped to get did not come. Vila did not protest. He did not try to get her to stop. May it always be so, he responded sagely. Nora immediately felt a stab of guilt wash over her. But she was surprised Vila was not upset. She didn't even sense it through the soul bond. Disappointed, but not angry or upset. She could never get Vila to be upset. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, she began. But Vila had already turned away. Nora followed after him into the cozy, candlelit cabin and silently stood in the doorway as Vila gathered up his things. Vila, I'm sorry, she tried to apologize again. I shall prevail, he assured her. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she ripped the scarf from her face. Is there any way I can make it up to you? She insisted. Vila smiled. I request permission to go to the Holy Mountain, he announced. Nora blinked and then frowned as she realized what mountain he was referring to. The thought of being alone ate at her stomach. Yet, surely he deserved some space, as she had been such a spiteful toad lately. And yet, she hated the thought of him going out into the cold northern waste by himself. Yes, it was his job to protect her, yet at the same time, she protected him as well. She was a war mage. Vila's job was to find trouble before it found them, and her job was to destroy it. Alone? She asked hesitantly. Part of her hoped she would be invited along. No, not exactly alone, Vila assured her. Nora lowered her gaze. Without me, she whispered. I need to complete the journey without magic of any kind, he insisted. Nora looked away. I understand, she said at last. It won't be long, he assured her. Nora didn't look back. Of course, she agreed robotically. Vila grunted. It is necessary. I would not be any help to you if I went soft. Besides, you will need time to get to know your new dragon, he encouraged her. Nora pressed her lips together. I don't want another dragon. I don't want to fly anymore, she cursed bitterly. But just as she felt as if she was going to burst into tears, Vila was at her side, and she closed her eyes as she leaned into his strong, tattooed arms and melted into his embrace. I feel your pain, Vila whispered. This was not mere words. Through their soul bond, Vila could indeed feel the empty, aching cavern of guilt and sadness inside her. Another dragon won't make it better. It won't be the same, she sniffed. It will be different, he agreed. Please don't go, she begged. The sooner I leave, the sooner I can come back, he assured her. Nora gave her a reluctant nod and smiled up at him. She knew it had to be done. Vila, her sword companion, was a wildling at heart. She had the authority to compel him to do whatever she wished, yet she would hate herself for doing so. Horses needed to run, dragons needed to fly, mages needed to wield magic, and men of war, men like Vila, needed to climb mountains, to hunt and to fight. As much as she longed to remain in his arms, she was going to love it even more when he returned, seething with vigor, the smell of smoke, musk, and pine in his hair. It wasn't easy being a sword companion, especially since the sword companions were typically the most skilled of the fighting class, who were tasked to protect their mage counterparts. Well, after all, a mage could start a cooking fire and send a whole army of infantry running in a mere seconds, without any help at all. Yet the mage's sword companion role was a vital one. While one mage could destroy an army, one crossbowman hidden in the trees could kill a mage. Thus, the sword companion's job was to protect against, find, and/or avoid such enemies. To do this well, they had to be extremely vigilant, skilled in both battle, tactics, and tracking. These skills not only needed to be kept sharp, but appreciated by sword companion and mage as well. It was easy for a mage to mock their companion's efforts and struggles to do simple, mundane tasks, such as make a shelter, light a fire, catch a fish, or to fight with fists or weapons. Accomplished field mages could do all these things and much more. That's, of course, when they were not injured, exhausted, or startled, or wished to remain anonymous. Any frivolous spellcasting while on campaign would likely paint them as targets by both assassin and other enemy mages alike. Please be safe, she said at last. She knew this was a silly thing to request, Going out into the cold Helvisti wilderness was the exact opposite of safe. That was the whole bloody point of going. To struggle, to be chilled to the bone, to make shelter, to build fire, to hunt, to go close as death as possible, and then to laugh and come back. Vila chuckled softly. Safe, said the mage, who plays with fire magic and tames dragons. Nora grinned. Dragons. They were extremely dangerous. She wasn't really sure what to compare them to. Men. Yes, she thought. You didn't really want to tame them. A tamed dragon was a miserable thing. Vila's large hands moved to pull away her fur coat. Oh, as much as she wanted him to rip off all her clothes right then and there, she stopped him. Her hands gripped his, and she closed her eyes. She could feel his heart pounding in his ears. It was intoxicating. Her eyes fluttered. She felt shivers run over her body. "Come back to me quickly," she teased, and smiled to herself when she felt the flustered, rumbling growl resonate within Vila's chest. That smile faded the moment Vila pulled away from her, began gathering his things into his pack. Flustered, Nora turned, her face flushed red, her blue eyes alight with desire. "What are you doing?" she exclaimed. Vila apathetically gave his shoulders a dismissive shrug. "Packing for my pilgrimage," he grunted. If there was anything Nora hated more, it was being ignored. She wanted to light his pack on fire and cut holes in his clothes, but she wasn't about to give him the satisfaction of allowing him to see her lose her mind. Not again, anyway. Instead, she moved toward her own luggage, where she struggled to keep her focus on simple levitation spells as she floated odds and ends neatly into her polished wooden travel chest. A hefty, plump feathered pillow came whizzing through the air and knocked her upside the head, causing her to lose all concentration. Everything came running down onto the floor. Her makeup, her perfume, her clothes and journal. Nora turned, but Vila nonchalantly continued to cinch up the strings to his ruck. However, when he turned to leave, Nora ran and leapt on top of him. This time, Vila did not disappoint, as he effortlessly flipped her head over heels onto the bed and began showering her with passionate, fiery kisses. Not all sword companions and their mages were lovers. Not all were soul-bonded. But it wasn't entirely unheard of either. Chapter 2. I Dream of Dragons. The graduation ceremony was everything May wanted. The black silk robes with the golden trim, the solemn march with her fellow apprentices through the winding garden with its vibrant flowers and songbirds, to finally be permitted to enter Founder's Keep as a mage. It was all she had dreamed of, and so much more. It was too bad that they could not hold weddings within the great gathering hall. The light streamed through on all sides from the stained glass window and created a breathtaking bouquet of warm colors that sparkled on the polished white quartz floor. It was supposed to be a happy day. It had been happy. For years she had stared up at Founder's Keep from her cramped dormitories. But now, at long last, she was accepted into the 8-sided Star Fortress, as a true mage. Her instructors that had once scolded and corrected now embraced her like family. Soon she would be expected to choose her craft. The most popular choice was to be an elemental mage. They were typically field mages who went on missions for Founders Keep or worked with the military on campaign. To be an elemental, you had to be quick and precise caster. Elementals didn't always have to be the most powerful. They just had to be faster than anyone else in a wartime situation or mage duel. Weather mages, in contrast, were expected to be powerful and have the longest reach, allowing them to control weather patterns in local regions. The other 6 were fairly self-explanatory: alchemy, nature, engineers, menders, telepaths, and dragon riders. May already knew what she wanted. She had wanted it ever since she was a girl, ever since she had seen those great, powerful, leathery wings fly overhead. She stopped and watched every time the dragon riders flew past. She wanted to be one. She wanted it more than anything. Every passing minute of every day, she had her nose in a dragon book, both academic and fantasy. She had only met one other person more in love with dragons than she was. She found Ben to be very strange. Ben was bigger than most mages. If he had not been wearing the apprenticeship robes, she would have assumed that it was one of the guards sneaking books out of their library. Ben's deformed ears were always a mystery to her. They weren't ugly, just abnormal. Well, not that abnormal, just not normal for a mage. Lots of guardians and their recruits had ears like that. Supposedly, it was a common injury from boxing or grappling. Being a mage required more will and mental prowess than physical strength. May wondered if she had the physical strength, if she would naturally preferred it over magic. She didn't really understand the allure of having fun while being punched in the face by your friends. The thought was so alien to her. Even if she could pass the strength and conditioning trials and beat all those sweaty meatheads up with their own wooden practice swords, she still wouldn't enjoy it. Not like they did. They seemed to be having fun even when they lost. May could see herself finding brawling with their fists mildly entertaining, but only if she was winning. She hated losing. But Ben seemed to be just as at home in the library as he was in the sparring yard. In a strange way, this made May like him even more. It also gave her an excuse to practice her mending abilities on him. She wasn't very good at it, but she could mend a few bruises. This, of course, was not enough to be accepted into the Mender's Hall. Unfortunately, Ben was 2 years ahead of her. May wished he could see her now. She was envious of him. She wondered what it was like in Dragon Hall. She wondered if he had already become a dragon rider, or if he had been restationed someplace else. She hoped not. She had dreamed of what his dragon would look like. They would go flying away together and have quiet moments on the sparkly, snowy ridges, staring up at the northern aurora dancing across the stars in its beautiful ribbons of elemental flames. Well, dragon riders were technically part of Founders Keep and had a spot at the Great Assembly. Dragon Hall proper was annexed quite the distance away from the actual school grounds itself, and was strictly off-limits to anyone except the overseer, who was in charge of the school of apprentices and all the mages in Founders Keep. Founders Keep housed 7 different magic disciplines, but the Hall of Dragons was truly unique, as anyone could join it. Sort of. The waiting list was long, but Mages and soldiers with military experience were put to the top of the list. There was just one problem. She hadn't told her family yet. After all the excitement was over, and everyone sat at the large family dinner table, the dreaded question was asked. The pleasant chime of a silver butter knife against a crystal wine glass cut through the laughter and side chatter and brought everyone's attention to Mauve, May's mother. "Your father and I are dying to know what craft you're going to choose to occupy yourself in." All fell silent. Even the kids at the children's table stopped what they were doing and turned to look at her. Stalling for time, May dabbed her lips with her napkin before putting it down in her lap. Her hand nervously clutched at the silver nautical star pendant as she cleared her head. Sensing his daughter's distress, Alfred, a large, heavy-set man, let out a hearty laugh. "My dear, take your time. No need to rush. No need to decide before we have some cheesecake. What? He chuckled. "Hear, hear," chimed her brother. May took in a deep breath. She would have to tell them eventually. It wouldn't be right disappearing for so long without telling anyone where she was going. The Hall of Dragons was not an easy endeavor. It would be like first-year novice all over again, but only worse and for longer. "I have decided," she declared. She paused and took another deep breath. The tension in the air was palatable. She braced herself for the deafening silence to follow. "The Hall of Dragons," she said at last. Mauve's smile fell. Her white-gloved hand clutched at her pearl necklace, staring at her daughter as if she had just sprouted a second head. It took a few moments for her to recover, but once she realized her daughter had been sincere, she jerkily rose from the table. "Excuse me," she whispered. Hoping to ease the tension, Alfred cleared his throat and reached toward the glass of wine. "Yes, the Dragon Hall is a very prestigious, very brave lot," he remarked, though it was quite apparent he was not entirely happy about the news. May understood why her mother was so upset. Her brothers had died serving as dragon riders. May was actually a little surprised at how well her mother had taken it. She had really thought she would just fly off the handle, and Mauve turned around. Her face was beet red, and her eyes were full of tears. "It would have been better if you joined the common infantry. Why not chase after the horse carts and shovel dung while you're at it?" she shrieked. "Darling, darling," Alfred tried to console her, but she would not be consoled. "How could you do this? How could you throw away all of your talents?" Mauve demanded. "I'm not throwing them away. I can still do magic. I'll still be a mage. There's a lot of dragon riders who are both," she shot back angrily. "You think it's that easy? You think it's just because you're a mage they'll just give you a dragon?" her mother scoffed. "No, they shave your head, you wear gray, and you work until you either quit, die, or prove yourself worthy," May thundered back. May, your hair! You can't cut your hair! I won't allow it!" May shot to her feet and defiantly ripped off her pointed blue graduation hat, revealing her cropped, fuzzy head. It hadn't been easy to cut off her rich, wavy, chocolate-brown hair, but somehow it felt more gratifying doing it herself than sitting down and being scalped by the barbers at the hall. Mauve swooned, and the servants rushed forward to catch her before her head bounced off the floor. "Oh dear," Alfred sighed as his wife was hauled out and glanced about the table. So, where's that cheesecake? Ah, there it is. Cheesecake, anyone? Anyone? He asked. May shakily reclaimed her seat and glanced about the table. She wanted to leave, but she refused. It was her party after all, and she was determined to have a good time, or at least not go crying off into her room. If she couldn't stand up to her mother, she wasn't ready to be a dragon rider. "I donated my hair to charity," May added pointedly. She refused to simply be guilted or bullied into an off-topic, non-offensive rabbit trail about the weather. The awkward, non-eye contact continued until finally her Uncle Marley chimed in. "For shame! Why give it away to strangers? You could have given it to me," he exclaimed in mock outrage as he pointed to his bald head. This got a few chuckles and lightened the mood, at least enough for her friends to stay a bit longer and resume polite conversation. She did her best to entertain them, but her mind and heart was already in Dragon Hall. Chapter 3. Come one, come all, to Dragon Hall. It was still dark when May was dropped off outside the city gate, but the sky was clear and the starlight was so bright the winding cobblestone road that led up to Founder's Keep shimmered like a silver ribbon. Even though she had already been initiated as an apprentice mage, Dragon Hall had their own rules. If May had chosen to go to any of the other 7 guilds, she would have been welcomed with open arms, showered with gifts and warm hugs, mentored and treated like family. This was not so in Dragon Hall. Recruits had to come with their heads shaven and dressed in worn-out gray clothes, and carry a written will and detailed instructions as to where to send their burnt-up, mangled bits and what was left of their meager wages. May felt awkward. She wondered what everyone would think of someone like her stepping off a nice carriage in the dirtiest gray rags she could find. She had been so embarrassed that she had insisted that she be dropped off further away. Howbeit, she regretted it as soon as she found that she would not have been the only one, and could have saved herself a good bit of walking. What was worse, she was now behind the growing line she had hoped to get ahead of. Dragon Hall only had so much space, and their quota would be filled quickly. While anyone could apply to Dragon Hall, not everyone got in on their first try. May knew of many who had applied 8 or more times before they were finally accepted, only to come running back to Founder's Keep a few months later. On the positive side, Dragon Hall was always looking for more cheap labor. On the negative side, only 1 of 1,000 would ever actually get to ride a dragon. But this didn't bother May. She knew over half of the people wanting to join would be satisfied just to have the opportunity to see a dragon up close, and the others would be weeded out by the strict, humiliating rules and back-breaking work. May felt confident she would make it, just so long as she didn't get injured, sick, or die. But May wasn't worried about that. She'd already made it through Founder's Keep, and magic wasn't safe either. It could kill or maim just as quickly as any dragon could, and she was already accustomed to chores, polishing floors, cleaning pots, and strict rules piled on top of long hours of study. While mages had the advantage in the application process, they could be turned away just like anyone else. Luckily, May had the advantage of reading all things dragons, including personal memoirs and accounts from current living dragon masters to the legends of old. Although she had never met them personally, May already knew about most of the dragon riders she'd be going in front of by name. May knew all this from two primary sources: Hidden in the Clouds, a biography and personal observation of cloud formations by Adar Solston. May had seen his likeness painted in the library. She would recognize his distinguished gray, peppered beard and thoughtful smile anywhere. His portrait, she found out later, was from Master Warren. Warren was such a colorful, funny man, she couldn't wait to meet him. His book, I Dream of Dragons, was so much more entertaining than Magi Solston's. Warren had lived life as a circus acrobat before running away to Dragonhall. Warren was also an artist, and his paintings and maps were the best in the world. Warren boasted of having a perfect memory and could draw anything to the finest detail if he just saw it once. May wasn't sure if he was embellishing or not. In the book he was always the hero and bragging how he saved everybody. Then again, if she was going to write a book, she was pretty sure she would leave out all the embarrassing things about herself as well. Even though Warren's adventure stories of how he become a dragon rider weren't academic or scientific read like Magi Solston's book, she found it wildly entertaining and included it among the small stack of books in her pack. Naturally, she took Magi Solston's book, and the third book she packed was Think Like a Dragon, Psychology 101 by Magi Glaudenmeyer Orsbin. May had strategically packed those books as she knew during the interview process she would be submitted to a search of her personal belongings, and she would be judged partially by her answers and by what she had packed. Nothing would be sacred at all, and if she made a word of protest, she would be dismissed and sent away without anything. Warren had been selected because of his drawings. While May wasn't the best artist, she had borrowed some of her sister's sketches and crammed a few art supplies as well. May promised herself that once she was accepted, she would begin practicing every day from that point onward. Besides, she wasn't actually going to lie. If she was asked, she would merely look down and shuffle her feet and let them decide if they were hers or not. So technically, it wasn't really a lie. Not really. And besides, after going through all this trouble of shaving her head and walking all this way, May couldn't stand even the thought of being sent back. She had to get in. May groaned as she shuffled behind what seemed an endless line of bald heads. She knew if she could just get to the interview, she would be accepted. She felt knots twist in her stomach as a horrible thought of having to walk all the way down the mountain and then wander around the house like a ghost with her bald shaven head while her mother constantly pricked and pried at her. May wondered if she could go and stay in the cramped apprentice dormitories at Founder's Keep or hide away under the stairs and try to sneak out into the dining hall to get some food, just so she wouldn't have to go back home. She still had her apprentice uniforms. Yes! It seemed like a wonderful idea until she realized that those were at home as well. "Watch out!" called a boy from behind her. May gasped and quickly stepped out of the way as several carriages rumbled on past. "Hey! Those people are cheating!" she exclaimed. The boy behind her shrugged. "Yep, somebody always does," he chuckled. May grimaced. Secretly, she wanted to kick herself for not trying to pull a few strings herself. Perhaps even arrived a day prior and sneak out from Founder's Keep. Loud, thunderous shouts arose and were shortly followed by the chorus of boos that rippled down the mountainside. May gasped. Later, she spotted the sobbing, shamed-faced youths walking barefoot down the mountain as they were pelted with rotten eggs and vegetables. May clasped her hands over her mouth when she spotted a girl that she had graduated with follow after him. No mercy or special treatment was given to the young girl. She walked barefoot and was topless, and her back was red from lashings just like everyone else. May turned to the young man behind her. "What happened?" "It's 8 lashings if you get caught cutting in line, and then you have to walk down barefoot and naked," he explained. May swallowed hard. Thankfully, her fears of not getting a chance to an interview began to look a little less bleak. As she watched the trickle of heavy heads and downcast-faced applicants glumly drag their feet as they began the long trek back down the mountain. Thankfully, no one booed or threw anything at them. It was hard for her not to feel sorry for them, as it was evident that they had tried many, many times. Some hid their faces in their shirts so no one would see them cry. As she neared the top, May could now see the large blue tent outside the gatehouse. It was precisely how Master Warren had described it in the book. Warren had even mentioned that she could see the gate that led to the sparring yards where the sword companions trained. While she couldn't see them, she could hear the smack and crack of wooden swords being hit together. As she approached the big tent, she bit her lower lip wordily. Out of hundreds that had applied, she saw less than 10 excited and very nervous recruits standing off to the side, staring up at Dragon Mount. "Next!" Another recruit ran out of the tent crying. May clutched her bag of belongings and held her breath as she walked inside. In front of her was a table of 4 very grim-faced dragon riders wearing matching black and dark blue checkered tunics. May immediately recognized Cora from Warren's book. She was thin and wiry, and her frazzled graying hair looked like a briar patch sprouting out from the top of her head. "Is there anything funny, child?" Cora demanded. May wilted, and her smile melted away, and she quickly shook her head. "What's your name?" asked a young woman with a long, dark ponytail and a soft but stern voice. "My name is May," she introduced herself. But the moment she did, her heart fell as Cora grinned like a shark and held up a letter. She felt her face burn red. She immediately recognized the handwriting. "Oh, Miss May Fields, I presume. Your mother sends her regards and hopes you will be well taken care of," she remarked sourly. "I'm pretty sure you're mistaking me for another May. I'm May Thatcher," she insisted. Oh, good. Now hand over the bag. We don't have all day," Cora snapped. May gulped and gave up her bag. Her eyes went big when she spotted Master Warren. Warren's face was full of gray bristles, and his long silver hair was swept back in a neat, short tail like a crafty old fox. She hadn't seen his likeness before, but she had heard so much about him, and she knew it was him because she spotted the small, flecks of different colored oil paints on his hands as he reached out and dumped all of her things onto the front of the table. "Oh, adorable! Look at this!" Cora remarked as she picked out her graduation star and held it up toward Irene. May beamed proudly. She was about to boast about all of her high marks when her hero, Master Warren, scowled in disgust. "Oh, great! Another wizard," he scoffed. Cora chucked the star into the fire pit. "I bet she thinks she's special," she sneered. May felt like she was going to burst into tears at any moment, but she knew if she did, the interview would be over. "These books look expensive," Irene remarked. "That's adorable. Tell me, did you come to read or to work?" Cora demanded. May swallowed hard. She knew if she said to work, Cora would toss him into the fire, and if she said to read, she'd be sent away. "To work, Magi Cora," she replied. Cora's bright white teeth curled into a cruel grin, but then she hesitated. "And how do you know my name, child?" she queried. May pointed to the stack of books that hovered perilously close to the burn pit. "Magi Solston spoke very highly of you in his books, Magi," she explained. Magi Solston dropped his notepad and quickly snatched the books from Cora's hands. "Cora, you're taking things way too far. Books are for reading, not burning. What's wrong with you?" he protested, and then frowned. "Well, maybe not this one. You can burn this one," he chuckled. Cora quirked a dark brow and smiled. "Gladly," she concurred. "No!" May exclaimed in protest. By the stern frowns and looks of disapproval, she knew she was going to join the line of sobbing, bald-headed wannabes on the long, lonely walk down the mountain. "That's my favorite one. Just give them back and I'll go," she sniffed. Irene glowered at Cora and quickly snatched up the books, but before she could stuff them back into the bag, Warren reached out and stopped her. "Hey, that's my book, and look, she's an artist just like me," he exclaimed. "Huh, it doesn't matter. She failed. Give her back her things and send her off." "The rules are clear," Cora snapped impatiently. Irene bristled. "I like her, and we need people who can draw good maps," she insisted. Cora rolled her eyes. "You like everybody," she scoffed and shouted through her cupped hands. "Next!" she called, but Warren quickly objected. Hang on. We didn't even get to vote, and right now it's a tie," he insisted. "Even if it is a tie, it doesn't matter. She failed. She doesn't have what it takes. She'll never be a dragon rider," Cora scowled. Magi Solston cleared his throat. His fingers rasped softly as they glided over his coarse peppered gray goatee. With great care, he used his quill to set fresh blue ink inside the blank cream cover. "Give her a chance," he insisted. May gasped as Solston handed over the autographed book toward her. "Look at her! She's already crying!" Cora scoffed. Magi Solston's dark, stern gaze fixed on Cora, and a firm line of disapproval set upon his forehead. "You would have cried, too, if your mother had tried to sabotage you, and your graduation star was chucked into the burn pit. Burning books is a line too far. If anything, she has proven she has done a lot of research, and she knows what she's getting herself into." Warren rolled his eyes. "Come on, Cora. Give the kid a break. Whether she quits or stays, we'll be back here again anyway, and it's getting late. Everybody's hungry. Let's just hurry and finish up the quota, he insisted. I'm a hard worker, May insisted. I wanted to be a dragon rider ever since I could walk. I know it won't be easy. I have read all about Dragonhall. I won't quit. I promise, she vowed. Cora gave May a hard glare. You'll quit. I'll make certain you will quit, she assured her. May stared at Irene, turned toward Warren, and then to Solston. Warren gave a somber nod of affirmation. Now get in line before I change my mind, Solston barked. May gasped. She had never felt so scared and excited in all of her life. She hurriedly ran and stuffed her clothes into her pack and went out to join the other recruits and waited to take the long journey up to Dragon Mount. My name is Marco, and I am the author, narrator, and glee man for Founders Keep. I wrote this during the lockdowns, and it is an audiobook for free on my YouTube channel at Dragonaudiobooks. If you want to read along, and if you absolutely love the book, you can get the hard copy, and you can get it in digital. The cool thing about this book is that you can share it with your friends, and you know J.R. Tolkien. Would you like to write him? You can't. He's gone. J.K. Rowling. You probably could messenger. She's a busy lady. She might get back to you. But me, I am here to entertain you. I am not just a writer. I am a glee man, if you will. And I do podcasts. I do audiobooks. So not only will you get this audiobook, you'll get all the other stuff that I put out on YouTube. And the most important thing, a sword. The most important thing, there will be dragons. There'll be lots of dragons. And most fantasy books, dragons have gone extinct and they're gone. These dragons are very much here and real. So there will be dragons. So Founders Keep, fantasy fiction, magic, mages, swords, true love, revenge. Dragon Audiobooks. Follow me on Twitter, Dragon Audiobooks, YouTube.